This video is all about Canon's 2023 camera roadmap. Is the Canon EOS R5 Mark II still coming out in Q2 2023? The R8, the R9? Don't tell me these are supposed to be APS-C censored cameras. And has Canon scrapped the R7c along with the R5s? Details coming up, but first I encourage you to subscribe and choose all notifications so you can stay up to date on all the latest camera gear, news, and rumors. Canon Rumors just posted an update to several cameras due out in 2023, and they're so confident in the information from their sources, they've classified it as a CR3, which means they consider it fact. While light on specifics, this video is more about an update on Canon's camera roadmap for 2023. The Canon EOS R8, R9 will be slotted between the R7 and R10 and will likely be APS-C. We don't have any confirmed specifications at this time. I'm a little bit confused by this, and let me explain why. We currently have the R10 and the R7, both APS-C censored cameras that were released not too long ago. Now, the R7 is more or less a refresh of the 7D Mark II. It's a little bit of the 90D, but I think that the R10 is more of the 90D. Both of them are kind of high-end hobbyist APS-C cameras, with the R10 starting at $979 and the R7 starting at $1399 or $1499. I can't remember the exact pricing at this point, but both of these cameras kind of sit at the high end. And the R8 and the R9 are, well, you've got the R7, you've got the R10, you've got the R6 and the R5, so we have two spots left, and that's the R8 and the R9. And the reason why I'm confused is we still have the EOS RP and the EOS R. These are both full-frame cameras, and we've been told by Canon Rumors and others that we could expect a full-frame replacement or successor of the Canon EOS RP and another full-frame camera to sit between that and the Canon R6 Mark II. If both of these R8 and R9 are supposed to be APS-C censored cameras, and if you look at the wording by Canon Rumors, they're kind of indicating that it's going to be one of these cameras and not both. But to have another APS-C camera between the R10 and the R7, that just seems to be a little bit overcrowded. I could understand another APS-C camera above the R7 because the R7 doesn't truly represent what the 7D did to birders, to other wildlife photographers. But to have one between the R7 and the R10 just seems to be a little bit overcrowded. I still think it makes sense to release a successor to the Canon EOS RP, because if we don't, well, that leaves $2,500 as Canon's first full-frame camera, and that's pretty expensive when we look at the competition. The Z5, the S5, cameras that are costing well south of $2,500. I'm not so sure this is correct, and if one of them is supposed to be an APS-C censored camera, I would imagine that would be the R9, and that would leave only one other camera to sit between the R9 and the R6, so this space is sounding a little confusing at this point. Without any specifications, it's really hard to determine what it might be, and Canon Rumors did say likely. It's not 100% sure. We do have two spots here. We have the R8 and the R9, and one of them is most likely going to be full frame, but if the other is APS-C, I don't know what to think about. What do you think? What do you think about the R8 and the R9? What do you think they're aimed at? What do you think they'll have in terms of specifications? We've got the R7, we've got the R6 Mark II, and we just don't have those other two spots filled. I think most likely we're going to see a Canon EOS RP successor. Canon could do away with another full-frame camera between that and the R6 if they really plan out the RP well enough. Maybe they've scrapped the RP and said, okay, look, let's put one full-frame camera, an entry-level camera that competes against the Nikon Z5 and, of course, against the Panasonic S5. We'll just have to wait and see, but I'm not so sure about this one. The Canon EOS R50 will be slotted below the Canon EOS R10 and will likely be similar in style to the Canon EOS M lineup. Now, this camera makes perfect sense to me. It's supposed to essentially replace the M50 Mark II. The M6 Mark II, no, that's more of the R10 is more of a replacement for the M6 Mark II. The M6 Mark II and the 90D are pretty much the same camera. The 90D being a DSLR and the M6 Mark II being mirrorless. So the M50, we don't know an awful lot about it at this point, but basically what you can do is you can take a look at the M50 Mark II, which is more or less a firmware update, and you can take that and beef up the specifications, and it'll give you an idea of what we can expect to see in the R50. Now, the R50 is supposed to be announced early in Q1 2023 at CP+, or at least in the week leading up to CP+. And CP+ is supposed to be taking place this year on February the 3rd. And with CP+ around February the 3rd, that means that in the week leading up to that, starting around January the 22nd, which is not far away, we'll start to get announcements by Canon, Nikon, Sony, and yeah, maybe even Panasonic. Although I think Panasonic might wait a little bit later, but we are due to get a refresh of the S series lineup. It's been 4 years since they came out with or announced the S1 and the S1R. The Canon EOS R5s, the long-rumored high megapixel camera, is still being mentioned. Wow, we've been hearing about this camera since, well, back in 2019. It was supposed to be a replacement of the 5D RS, and we haven't heard much about it since. Well, we have heard one specification, is that it's supposed to have north of 100 megapixels. Then we heard, well, no, basically the R1 is going to replace it. It's going to have a 85, 88 megapixel sensor. But Canon Rumors is telling us this morning that Canon hasn't forgotten the Canon EOS R5s is still being talked about. It's still a camera that's planned to be coming out in 2023, but we don't have any specifications on this camera. So if you've been waiting patiently for an update on the Canon EOS 5D RS, well, it looks like the Canon EOS R5s will be that replacement, that successor, but we don't have any specifications other than it's still got a heartbeat and it's most likely due out in 2023. And now let's move on to the Canon EOS R5 Mark II. This is a camera that we reported on back on Friday after Canon Rumors leaked a full set of leaked specifications for the camera. We had something like 18 different specifications, from a 61 megapixel backside illuminated sensor to dual Digic 10 image processors. And wow, dual CF Express Type B cards, and the list goes on, talking about 8K up to 60 frames per second, 9.2K oversampled, 4K, all the way up to 120 frames per second. If you want to know more of the details of those leaked specifications, you can find them right here. But in this morning's post, Canon Rumors says this about the Canon EOS R5 Mark II. The Canon EOS R5 Mark II, we recently reported on this camera, and according to the latest rumors, it'll be coming in Q2 of 2023. This is what I've been waiting for, looking forward to all weekend. Once Canon Rumors put out that leaked specifications on the Canon EOS R5 Mark II, I knew it wouldn't take too long to get validation of some of the information. And while we didn't get validation of any of the specifications, we did get confirmation from Canon Rumors. Remember, this is a CR3 telling us that the Canon EOS R5 Mark II is not only real, but it's coming out in Q2 2023. Now, like everything we've heard about in rumors over the past few years, one thing that tends to be true is while we get the information correct, at least I'd say 95% of the time, what tends to happen, though, is dates can get pushed, and especially what we're seeing with Nikon. They're having such trouble trying to get a hold of parts and components, and Canon, well, they've done better, but still they're having trouble with parts and components. So if we hear that the R5 Mark II gets pushed into Q3, I wouldn't be too surprised. We could hear of an early July announcement like we did with the R5 Mark I. But at this point, Q2 means anywhere around April, May, and June. I'm predicting probably a May. That's kind of a traditional time for Canon, and usually we'll see some really big camera announcements towards the end of May, but I certainly would love to see an April announcement, but that would be on the heels of NAB 2023. I'm really curious to see what's going to happen with the R5 Mark II. I want to see validation. Is it truly going to be a 61 megapixel backside illuminated sensor? Are we really going to get two Digic X image processors or Digic 10 image processors? And based on what I've read from DP Review, they're saying that while the Digic X also went inside the R6 Mark II, it was an updated processor. That's right, the Digic 10 image processor in the R6 Mark II has been updated and improved somewhat, but it's still got the Digic X moniker. So the R5 Mark II, if it gets two Digic 10 image processors, they'll be updated. That will be an awful lot of horsepower on a 5 series camera. And I've never known Canon to put in two image processors in a camera other than the 1 series. So that's why I'm waiting for validation on some of these specifications, because some of them seem a little bit strange. And again, that EVF with 9.44 million dots. Sure, that's pretty common for Sony cameras, but previously on Canon, we've had something like 5.76 million dots. And of course, that 61 megapixel backside illuminated sensor, that sounds very familiar to another R5 camera, the Sony A7 R5. But now let's move on to the Canon R7c. We're getting some conflicting information that the product has been scrapped. We hope to hear more about the R7c one way or another in the near future. We hope to hear more information about the R7c. I certainly hope so. The FX30 is selling very, very well. People are very happy with this camera. At $1,798, less than half the price of the FX3, but all the same capabilities. The FX30 is just doing very, very well. It's already been in the top 10 in terms of camera sales worldwide, and a lot of people are demanding this camera. A lot of people love this camera. And in terms of studio shooting, like what I'm shooting here, or shooting events and that kind of stuff, the FX30 is just a terrific camera. Yes, it's APS-C, but there's nothing wrong with APS-C or Super 35. We've been shooting with these types of cameras for many years. And yes, it doesn't have as much dynamic range or low light performance as a full frame, but when you compare the FX30 against the FX3, you can clearly see that there's only about one stop of dynamic range off, and otherwise, the FX30 is a terrific camera. And there's a hole in Canon's lineup. There's no answer to the FX30, but maybe, just maybe, that the R5c didn't sell nearly as well as we thought, and maybe Canon's taking another look and determining whether the R7c makes sense. With constrictions on parts, supplies, lenses, everything, maybe Canon's just taking a look and saying, look, you know what, the R7c, maybe there's not as much demand for this. Whereas the Canon EOS R5 Mark II, there's an awful lot of demand for that. The Canon EOS RP, also an awful lot of demand for that. So maybe Canon's going to double down on those things as well as some lenses. We haven't had an update to Canon's lens roadmap for the RF mount for 2023, but we suspect we'll get a handful of lenses as well. And of course, the Canon EOS R1, the reason why we haven't talked about that camera in this roundup is because, according to the latest rumors by Canon Rumors, that camera isn't supposed to be announced until the Paris Olympics, in 2024. There is a chance we might get an announcement for the R1 in late 2023, but that's been pushed now another year. So by the time the Canon EOS R1 comes out, Sony might be coming out, or might have already released, a successor to the Alpha 1, their flagship mirrorless camera, and who knows, maybe even Nikon will have an update to the Z9. 2024, that's a long time away. I mean, I'm still getting used to the fact that 2023 isn't too far away. But that's all we have for today. Stay tuned and make sure you subscribe and choose all notifications, so that way as soon as I hear any more information on the Canon EOS R5 Mark II, the R50, or any of the other cameras mentioned in this 2023 Canon roadmap, you'll be sure to get an update, because as soon as you choose all notifications, well, you have to subscribe first, and once you subscribe and choose all notifications, you'll get an update from YouTube, so that way you can stay up to date on the latest camera news and rumors. That saves you from scrubbing all the latest Twitter feeds, RSS feeds, all your favorite websites, print magazines, YouTube channels. If time matters to you, I do all that for you, so that way you can just come here. I cover all the major camera news, all the major brands, all the latest news and rumors. And as I published just a little bit earlier this morning, or maybe this video will come out first, I have a review video on some storage. That coming up next. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again soon.